Hello and welcome. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the U.S. My name is Andrea, and I am your host. I am from Saratech, and we're fortunate enough to have Derek Barkey. He's our Director of Advanced Engineering here with us today, and he's going to be talking about extending your engineering resources. But first, I'd like to quickly tell you a little bit about Saratech. For over 15 years, we have been teaming up with our customers to help optimize their processes across their design, analysis, manufacturing, and quality systems. We are an industry leader in the PLM space through our partnership with none other than Siemens. And we are their #1 partner in the Americas. Headquartered in Orange County, California, our team of professionals are located all over the U.S. to be closer to our customers. For instance, I am right outside of Orlando, Florida, and so we have employees all over the U.S. to make sure that we are really taking very good care of our customers. Today, we are going to save the questions and comments until the end of the webcast. So if you have any questions or comments, please add them over in the chat box or the questions box over to the right. And I will be happy to address those at the very end, and Derek will be happy to answer any questions you may have. And with that, I would like to hand the reins over to Derek.
Thank you, Andrea. And thank you for joining us today. First, a little bit about myself. As Andrea mentioned, I am Director of Advanced Engineering here at Saratech. I have 30 years of engineering experience, including engineering management positions at Boeing, as well as engineering consulting firms. And I have aerospace industry experience, as well as automotive, biomedical, heavy machinery, a wide variety of different industries. Today, we're going to talk about engineering outsourcing. We're going to start with engineering management challenges, how an engineering service partner can help you, doing engineering tasks in-house versus using an outsourcing opportunity, choosing the right strategy for you and deciding whether to outsource your engineering tasks, what sort of engagement models there are for using engineering outsourcing, and then, of course, how Saratech can help you through outsourcing. So typical engineering management challenges are really not even restricted to engineering. Manufacturing, of course, is where a lot of people have focused on improving efficiency in the last few decades. Previous waves of improvement have focused on things like just-in-time delivery to minimize inventory and work in process, outsourcing non-strategic commodity manufacturing, quality programs to reduce waste, kitting and manufacturing cells to make manufacturing more efficient, and then things like automation and robotics to reduce engineering labor. So pretty much all the efficiencies probably that can be squeezed out of manufacturing have been done or in the progress of being done. And so what's happening now is customers are focusing on the non-manufacturing processes to reduce their costs. So for example, you're probably already doing many of these things, reducing testing and prototyping through CAD, CAM, and CAE. In other words, using the computer to reduce the actual hardware that you have to deal with when you're designing a product. Using data management for information reuse and to coordinate geographically dispersed teams. And then cycle time reduction, focusing on doing tasks faster with fewer resources, using a variety of engineering automation capabilities. For example, writing engineering scripts and macros to automate common tasks. And then finally, staff management. Many companies are already doing outsourcing in order to minimize how much they have to staff up in order to deal with surges in new projects. In short, engineering managers are being asked to do more with less and do it faster. Specifically talking about outsourcing, there are some obvious advantages, and this is true for both engineering and for manufacturing. So for example, offloading capital investment. If you outsource your manufacturing and your engineering, you don't have to invest as much in capital equipment. You leave that to your outsourced partner. Your outsourced partner can also do things more cheaply because they have multiple suppliers, or multiple customers rather, that they're working with, and they can spread the cost of capital and use that capital equipment more efficiently because they have multiple projects using it. So rather than buying a milling machine and using it for only 10 hours a week, a machine shop can buy that milling machine, and by spreading the work over multiple customers can keep it operational 40 hours a week. And typically suppliers have a lower overhead and labor cost. And companies have moved away from just outsourcing manufacturing like this into other functions that are not considered strategic. So for example, information technology, payroll. Probably the vast majority of your employers are already outsourcing payroll. Legal services, human resources services, and so forth. So these are support functions that are not really strategic to the company, and they are outsourcing them rather than trying to do them in-house. And offloading your engineering can have similar benefits. Again, if you're outsourcing something, you don't have to invest in capital equipment. But you don't have to invest in human capital either. So for example, you don't have to spend money on training engineers. Your outsource partner takes care of training the engineers. Similarly, software licenses, IT infrastructure, office space, all of that can potentially be reduced by using an outsourcing partner. An outsourcing partner also gives you access to a wider range of skills and expertise, that you can have them draw upon things that you can't do in-house or don't perhaps want to invest to develop in-house from a skill standpoint. And then, of course, you only pay for engineers when you need them if you outsource them. So you don't have to bring engineers in and worry about them being idle when you're not actively engaged in a project. But outsourcing increasingly is not really about reducing cost entirely, but also driving innovation. So if you bring in engineers from outside your organization, you're exposing your organization to alternative methods and technologies. There's a tendency in organizations to do business as usual. In other words, you sit down to design a new product. Well, the natural inclination is to take your previous product and use that as the starting point. And sometimes by bringing in engineers from outside your organization with a fresh viewpoint, you can be more innovative. Deloitte released a global outsourcing survey for 2016. If you haven't read this, you can find it on the internet. I'd encourage you to go look at it. A few highlights that I pulled out of that survey are, first off, that improvements from labor and process improvements have largely been achieved. This at least is the impression they get from surveying managers across a variety of industries. So in simply looking at making your process better is not necessarily going to give you the same sort of return on investment that you've seen in the past. You're starting to get to a point of diminishing returns. But they did find that their survey respondents identified outsourcing as being a pathway for innovation. So again, you're trying to bring in fresh eyes, fresh viewpoints, fresh skills from outside the organization to make their organizations more innovative, not necessarily entirely in order to make it more efficient. And that value rather than cost is the new watchword. In other words, rather than focusing strictly on the price, they're looking at what do we actually get in terms of a return from using an outsourcing partner. In short, innovation is not a commodity and cost is not the preeminent metric. What you're really looking for is what can make your company more competitive. So the next question is, what engineering functions are the logical functions you want to outsource? Obviously, you probably don't want to outsource all engineering tasks and engineering functions. Engineering and technology are probably the cornerstone of your competitiveness. MIT's Sloan School of Management had some recommendations for strategic outsourcing. So of course you want to concentrate your firm's resources on your core competencies. Okay, those things that you think your company is really good at are the things that you want to maintain your competitiveness in. Things that are more support-oriented, things that are not critical to your competitiveness or your core competency, are the things that you want to consider for outsourcing. Just as in business functions, things like IT or human resources are considered perhaps not strategic and subject to outsourcing, there are some engineering tasks that also make sense to outsource. So how do you decide which of those tasks makes the most sense to outsource? Well, you have to identify which ones are your strategic tasks and which ones are your non-strategic. So a strategic function is something that gives you a competitive advantage, something that's unique to your company. Non-strategic functions are things that you have to do from an engineering standpoint, but perhaps don't involve something that you would consider proprietary to your company, something that would be difficult for a competitor to replicate. And this categorization changes over time. They're not static categories. As your technologies advance, things that gave you a competitive advantage at one time, well, as your competitors start to catch up with those technologies, perhaps they stop being strategic and can become considered non-strategic and candidates for outsourcing. In order to identify these things, it's best to look at not only your business, but also your competitors. Which activity is more strategic and difficult for the competitors to replicate? So I'll give you an example. In the case of Boeing, you could look at Boeing as a designer and builder of aircraft. But an alternative way of looking at Boeing is not that they design and build aircraft, but that they develop requirements for an aircraft to meet market needs, and then develop an airplane configuration and integrate that airplane configuration to meet those requirements. Actually building the structure is probably not really all that strategic for Boeing, because there are literally hundreds of companies around the world that can build aircraft structure. The exception might be if you have a really innovative structure, you have a very high technology structure. For example, large composite primary structure for Boeing might be considered something that they would maintain as being strategic. But conventional riveted aluminum structure would probably not be considered strategic for them. So a non-strategic engineering function is a candidate for outsourcing if it doesn't involve proprietary technology and can be easily replicated by a competitor. I'll give you another example. I once talked to an individual at a helicopter company, and he said that they would happily outsource structural components, even composite components, but they would never outsource anything related to the gearbox and rotor systems because that was the heart of their competitive advantage. That was a strategic capability that they wanted to keep in-house. A non-strategic example would be routine assembly and test tooling. If you're assembling a product, you need typically tooling to assemble it. But typically, unless that tooling represents some sort of novel manufacturing capability, the tooling itself is not really all that strategic. So that would be a candidate for outsourcing. So having identified which engineering functions are perhaps considered non-strategic, the next question is, well, how would I actually go about outsourcing some of these engineering functions in order to generate some of these benefits in terms of cost savings and innovation? Well, one way is contract engineering. And contract engineering is a tried and true method that's been used in industry for decades. With contract engineering, you're basically buying labor and you're being billed by the hour. An alternative engagement model is partnering. In partnering, you provide specific deliverables to your partner, and your partner delivers those deliverables rather than just engineering labor. As with contract engineering, this can be time and materials, in other words, paid by the hour, or it could be a firm fixed price as long as you can define a specific scope. Not unlike outsourcing buying hardware. When you outsource hardware or parts, you know specifically what you're going to be delivered. So you can charge that for a fixed price. If you can define your engineering tasks with a similar sort of specificity, then you can potentially do that as a fixed price as well. So let's talk a little bit more about contract engineering. So you can get short-term labor without actually hiring an employee. And that allows you to staff up your engineering organization and staff it down quickly. Typically, you can get a contract engineer in place sometimes within a matter of days or even hours to meet your needs. And these contract engineers can provide the skills to your organization that you may not have. And they can potentially also reduce some overhead, because of course now you no longer have to worry about benefits and things like that that would not normally be paid to a contract engineer. There are some drawbacks to that though. If you bring a contract engineer in, they function essentially like one of your own employees, which means that you need to provide software for them, computer hardware for them. You have to provide an office space. Basically, all the overhead costs of actually providing a functioning environment for that contract engineer are still required for you to provide. And of course, you still have to manage them. When contract engineers are idle, you still have to pay them if they're on site. And if you need them to work overtime, typically you end up paying them significantly more. The performance of a contract engineer is also sometimes difficult to evaluate. Typically, you just have a resume to look at and perhaps a brief interview. And so what they can actually deliver to you is somewhat unpredictable. And then once your contract is over and you let that contract engineer go away, the lessons learned and the product knowledge, the knowledge of your product, is frequently lost. That contract engineer moves on to another engagement, and if you need their services again, that may be difficult. So that's contract engineering. How does that contrast with the alternative model of partnering? Typically with partnering, what you're doing is you're working with a company, not an individual. So you're coming to a company like Saratech and asking them to work with you as an extension of your engineering department. As a result, the partner has a great interest in your success. They want you to be successful, so they will bring them additional business. And a partner typically will provide the capital and labor so that you don't have to. Typically, they will provide the computers, the office space, the engineering software, whatever is required to complete the task. Because again, you're buying a task, not necessarily labor. Similarly, the partner can absorb unutilized labor time or allocate it to other projects. Just like the milling machine I mentioned earlier, if the engineer is not actively engaged on your project this week, they can be potentially engaged on a project for another customer. So you don't necessarily pay for that downtime. So the partner is managing these resources, and they're managing the schedule and making sure that the appropriate number of engineers is assigned when they're required, and that those engineers are reallocated when they're not required, which saves you the difficulty of having to manage that yourself. And then, of course, once the project is over, well, that partner is still there. Their staff are still in place. So if you need additional work from them in the same product line at some point in the future, you have a pretty good chance of actually being able to re-engage the same team and being able to benefit from the lessons learned and the product knowledge that they gained from previous engagements. There are drawbacks to this, of course. Nothing comes free. Typically, you end up paying a higher rate for a partner, which makes sense since they're carrying a lot of that capital equipment cost, and they are having to reallocate resources when they're not actively utilized. So as a result, inevitably, the labor hours or the labor rate has to be slightly higher in order to account for that added cost. And typically, you're going to engage a partner for larger projects. You're not going to engage them for a 40-hour task. It really doesn't make sense to get a partner spooled up to work on a 40-hour task. And a lot of these benefits of resource management and capital equipment are less obvious for smaller engagements. So there are some drawbacks to a partner engagement, which is why a lot of customers will still use contract engineers when it's appropriate, but more and more they turn to a partner arrangement when it makes sense. So how can Saratech help you engage in a partner relationship? Well, we are an engineering services partner. As Andrea mentioned earlier, we're a Siemens reseller, and in fact, the #1 Siemens partner in the US. But we also have an engineering group, and that engineering group provides design analysis to a wide range of industries. We also have a network of fabrication and test partners, which allows us to actually deliver hardware, low-volume hardware, tooling, prototypes, small volume manufacturing to our customers. So we can provide essentially a turnkey solution. Sorts of services we offer are, of course, based on the Siemens NX platform, but we are able to provide services using a wide variety of engineering tools. For example, PTC Creo, the Dassault systems, ANSYS, CAE software, and so forth. So our engineers have a broad background in a variety of CAD, CAM, and CAE tools. So we can adapt to whatever platform your engineering department is based on. And we employ these tools to do product design and optimization, tooling design and optimization, analysis and simulation across a wide variety of disciplines, PDM and PLM implementation, product development, reverse engineering, and application programming. So for example, with application programming, we can help write scripts or programs that will automate engineering functions to make your organization more efficient. As I mentioned, we do have the ability to do manufacturing. So we can do manufacturing optimization assessments, concept developments and prototyping. And we also have the ability to do additive manufacturing in-house. So we can create rapid prototypes of parts that you can evaluate in 3 dimensions. What you see on the left, for example, is an aerospace assembly jig that's composed of 3D printed parts as well as aluminum extrusions. Our engineering and support capabilities include structural design analysis, dynamics, mechanical system analysis and design, safety, maintainability, and reliability assessments, tooling design, thermal and fluid dynamic analysis, so thermal management for electronics, fluid flow for cooling, and design optimization using numerical optimization algorithms. As I mentioned, we can do additive manufacturing and simple to complex tool fabrication as well as prototyping. We also provide training to our customers, specifically in the Siemens suite of tools, Team Center, as well as parametric technologies and Windchill. So next I'd like to provide a brief case study about, as an example of partnering and how that can be helpful. So Saratech was approached by a logistics company, and they need fixtures to transport aircraft components. This is not something that they had necessarily in-house from an engineering standpoint. So they came to us to basically be their engineering and design department. So using our existing team of engineers, we were able to rapidly develop a fixture for securing and transporting these aerospace components. And we were able to deliver a design in 1 month. But the story actually continues. So approximately 1 year later, this company came back to us, said they were very happy with this tooling, this fixture, but they realized that they could potentially redesign it to carry 2 components at once rather than 1 and greatly reduce the transportation costs. Well, the advantage of coming back to Saratech was that the same people who designed the original fixture are still available. So they're able to take the existing design and revise it to carry 2 different components, because this now is based on the product knowledge from the previous design. And those same people can rapidly do that sort of task without having to be re-educated about what the requirements are or how it was done in the past. So that's an example where using a partner provides some benefit simply because you're able to reuse a lot of the product knowledge and process knowledge from previous projects. So in summary, having a good engineering services partner not only improves efficiency, but potentially also innovation. Saratech has the experience and expertise to be a partner in a wide variety of industries. And I'd be happy to discuss your partnering needs for engineering outsourcing at any time. So feel free to contact me at the number or email here to discuss what your needs are.
Great job.
At this point, I think we have time for questions.
Yeah. Let's open it up for questions. And Derek, you did a great job. Thank you so much. And I know there's so many other awesome projects that you would love to get into detail about, but we don't have the time today. And because of our privacy policies, obviously we're not able to get all those details. But I know that we have just such a wide range of awesome projects that we've done. And yeah, if there's any questions, please feel free to go ahead and type them into the chat box on the right-hand side. We got one question during the webcast.
Great.
So what does the timeline usually look like from the point that we decide to do services with Saratech?
Well, that depends tremendously on the project. The standard process is that we would have a discussion on what the statement of work is, what the requirements are, what the deliverables would look like, and develop a proposal around that and that would include both cost and schedule for achieving the deliverables. That process, typically depending on the complexity, can take anywhere from a few days to several weeks. Our goal typically is once we have authority to proceed, we have a purchase order in hand, our objective is to start working on the project within a week if the data is available. It typically takes us a few days to line up the resources and marshal the staff, but typically within a week we'll start working.
Okay, awesome. We do have another question. What kind of training classes do you offer? Are they public, or can we customize them to our own needs?
Good question. We have public training. We have a training facility at our headquarters in Mission Viejo, and we periodically host public classes, and you can find those on our website. But typically what we find is most customers would prefer to train a large number of engineers or a larger engineers where it becomes more cost effective rather than to send them to our training facility. It makes more sense for us to send a trainer to your facility. And the added benefit of that is it allows us to focus on just which areas you're specifically interested in and customize and focus our training just on those areas. Since it's a private class, to a certain extent, you can define what gets covered and in what rate.
And if needed, those are available online as well, correct?
We do have web-based delivery of training as well.
Okay.
Rather than sending a representative on site, we can potentially do it through a web-enabled platform.
Okay, awesome. Well, again, thank you everyone for attending. I wanted to let you know that we have recorded the session and we'll be posting it to YouTube today. And you can find lots of awesome, really informative videos and webinars and all of that on our YouTube channel. And so I'll be pointing you to that when I send out the replay. And if you don't mind, please stick around for just about 12 or 15 seconds after the webinar has ended and just fill out a survey for us. We'd really appreciate your feedback. And there you can enter any other questions or comments that you have, and we'll be happy to follow up with you. And thank you again. Great job, Derek. And we hope to be speaking with all of you soon.